Good morning. Ayin Beis, volume 3. We are on top of page 1309, Aleph Shintes. And the Rebbe Rashab, in a very coherent and cohesive manner, Chabad style, is explaining the purpose of the Brias Adam Lamata, of the human being's creation down below, which is to radiate, illuminate the darkness of this world. And what does darkness mean? He explained at length. It's the concealment of the divine energy and the divine force that creates and sustains everything in existence. So though it's there, and with faith we know it, but without concentration and focus, because of the tzimtzumim that God applied, it does not come natural without effort, without Ayin Beis, like you said, Ayin or Maimik, which requires a contemplation and a meditation and concentration and understanding of the divine force, which now he's been discussing what exactly does that contemplation consist of and how that stimulates that once you become aware of it and conscious of it, it isn't just a cognitive experience, it actually creates a passion and a love to connect and attach and become one and close to that divine force. Instead of, in other words, worshiping the product, you worship the producer. So you connect with, and as he explained in detail on page 1308. And to break it down, he made it clear that faith is more of a passive, static state, which can even, that does not deal with the darkness, because you can have a ganef who has faith, but he prays to God to succeed in his theft, which means faith alone does not necessarily eliminate the darkness. However, when you concentrate and you become integrated, internalize it, that's the contemplation he's talking about during davening. He says specifically, and he said a few points, which I'll just sum up quickly. One is that nothing creates itself. Ein davar eses atzmei. So every yesh has to have, is a chiddush, is a mechudesh, means it had to been put there as a new entity, doesn't have an endless beginning. It's not mitzusim atzmusei, meaning its existence is from within itself. It's not necessary existence. It means it was put there, so there's a creator. That creative force is there constantly, has to continuously, perpetually create and energize it. If not, it ceases to be. The next point he made was that there's the wonder, the hafla of Isavus, that on one hand, godliness, like we just said, the godly energy is there all the time. At the same time, we don't feel it. So it's like separate from us. So that itself, that contemplation itself is a wonder of the divine. His flaws, Isavus, as he said. And then there's the Gedulas Hashem, the Brias Isavus Elmas. We see the greatness of God in this sheer multitude and magnitude of the creations. All this, all this creates a passionate excitement in the soul, a yearning, a longing, a pining to be absorbed in aval elokus, in a great love to godliness, when you appreciate what we're talking about, like it is with all things. You know, you could have a parent, a spouse, a child. If you don't think about it, you can take them for granted. When you concentrate on what they've done for you and the things that their qualities and what kind of role they play in your life, that awakens that love that's there, but was concealed until you concentrated on it. Okay. And then I'll just go into this, since he broke it into further details, Ubafrat, at the bottom of page 1308, that you contemplate this benes b'chayis el kisha be'elmus u'maimik daite be'efen ha'er v'achayis shemel. So now he's going into more detail, which I think is really setting the stage to where we're up to right now. Give me one moment, please. 1 second, please. Okay, sorry about that. So, because in reviewing it again, what we learned now and yesterday, what we're up to now, what we learned yesterday, I was thinking about what is the befrat, what is the Rebbe Rashab coming to add with the befrat. So he says the words that when you contemplate, and the divine energy within the world, in the eifun of the Ohr and the Chayos. So till now, he was talking about there's a creator, there is the wonder of the paradox of the creative energy being in existence and not feeling it or feeling like it's separate from us. There's the magnitude and multitude and magnitude of creation. But now he's talking about the way this energy manifests itself in creating. So it's more like the dynamics and the mechanics of how God creates, which is not discussed until now. So he's going into more of a specific contemplation in the Befrat, Ohr v'Chayos. And you'll see that these words, Ohr v'Chayos, is going to become very important now in the next paragraph on page 1309. He's going to explain that there's two types of energy. One is called Ohr and one is called Chayos. Yesterday, when we learned that I saw there were two things here, but I see now that it's actually setting the stage. So I would say Ubefrat should be the new paragraph, because Vihine Inyan Ohr v'Chayos b'chlolos in the next paragraph is actually an explanation of this Ubefrat. That would be the way I would have probably broken it. But regardless, the way it is, it is. So it's the Eifun Shemeile B'zeh Eira L'kiba Nafshe. So I'm just going over this a little more in detail, though we learned it yesterday. I'm reading at the bottom of page 1308. So he says, Shemeile B'zeh Eira L'kiba Nafshe. So now he's talking about this energy, this divine energy that is within the world, radiates within him the Eir Aliki in his nefesh, because it also includes the human beings. Because it's not just the whole world; it's every human being, and every person also has benafshe ubchinas kiruv ubchinas dvekus ba'Eir Aliki v'reitzim eid b'alakus. So what I think he's adding here is, because based on the 3 points he made before, so there God is the creator. Yes, God is energizing everything and remains removed. And the multitude of magnitude of Rabu v'gadlu masecha. But you could argue, I'm just adding what I think that Rabbi Rashab is trying to qualify. You could say, but how is that personal to us? That means, yes, of course, it creates a love for God because God is your creator. But now when you start thinking about the Ohr v'Chayos that also radiates within you, so it's also the energy that is actually there with you all the time, like he's soon going to explain, like it is with the neshama. Just as a person loves their life, they will love God who gives us life, is the source of life. So the Ohr v'Chayos, that adds in the kiruv and the dvekus b'Eir Aliki. Now, if you don't contemplate on it, it's there, but as we spoke earlier, it's concealed. But the contemplation now includes also recognizing that that energy is very much pulsating within you. And that's what I believe he's adding here. And now he continues. He's going to go back to it, this Ohr v'Chayos that we just spoke about, but then he's going to, first he sums up, and all this, all the above, including the Befrat that we just read, weakens and subdues the animal soul, that the animal soul, which without this contemplation was the dominant force that even controlled and held the divine soul hostage. He said earlier that it causes the divine faculties to be concealed. But now the tables have been turned, because now the divine soul is now shining forth, and therefore it dominates the person's mind and heart, as he explains in Tanya, but like he explains here. So now it causes the opposite. It weakens the hold of the desires of the animal soul, that it shouldn't want these inyanim gashmim v'chumim she'ein reitzah u'misrachek mehen, and he distanced himself from it. And this is even more so, more specifically, when not only the divine soul is contemplating on it and so-called subduing the animal soul, but actually persuades the animal soul to go along, because also the animal soul can understand these forces, the divine forces at work. These bonus that also the animal soul yovin v'yasig esa inyan eliki. So that obviously adds even more to the bit, because it's one thing subduing or controlling your enemy by just quieting it and being more powerful than it. It's another when you actually can convince the enemy to also agree that this is a better way. So he's going to talk about this more on the next page on 1310. Okay. Now, then he adds, and so I'm just going over again what we learned yesterday, v'chein. So here too, what is he adding now, v'chein? Is he talking about the animal soul, that not just that you can explain to the animal soul in general the divine force in existence, or is he talking about the animal soul that you can also explain the slapshus, how elikus is mislabish in? So from the flow, it seems like the v'chein is going a continuation of the animal soul, but you could also say he's talking in general now. He's going back to the general hisbonenus of the divine soul and maybe the animal soul in the slapshus, that this shayach hasaga. I lean towards saying that it's also for the animal soul because he uses the word hasaga, which means Yovin v'yasig, like the saga of the nefesh habamis, but you could also say he's negating the concept of faith alone, because the whole piece is based on understanding, not just believing. So it's not really definitive whether the v'chein goes on the last few lines or on the whole section before. Either way, it makes sense. It's not like one way or the other is right or wrong. Maybe they're both right. So now he says like this, that this is slapshus in Olam is also shaykh hasaga. Shebezeh shaykh hasaga. Because so now he begins what we started discussing yesterday. He's going to talk first about the human being, and then from that, apparently he's going to go back to the general world. So he says, "For my flesh I behold God, the a person feels the nefesh within him." Now, this is clearly, he's going back to the Ohr and Chayos, that's because he said before, if you look at the second line from the bottom. This is not the three other points he made, which is that there's a creator, the paradox of creation within and not felt, and seemingly removed by Avdallah, or the multitude of magnitude. He's looking now that you feel the nefesh within you. So he's, of course, using that as an example to also feel the likus within us, which he didn't speak about the world yet, but he's speaking about a person. So a person clearly knows there's a nefesh within us. The sense that you are alive, the very feeling that you're alive is a feeling. You feel life. A person, God forbid, who's not alive doesn't feel life. So clearly, margish nafshe. However, it's not the mehusa nefesh. You don't. Someone asks you, "What is the soul like?" There, on our own, we just know that it's a life force. So the difference between mitzias and mehus, we've discussed a number of times. Mitzias means you know it exists, but you may not know anything about it. Its details, its personality, its character, its essence, like many things. You could see something, for example, that if you're not a trained eye, you say it exists, but I don't know what it is. Today we know there are molecules and atoms. If you're not study science, you know that those things exist, or other things that you see that are mysteries, but they exist. A black hole, or something more on Earth. So mitzias means the knowledge of its existence. Faith is you don't even know mitzias. Mitzias, at least you know it exists, even though you may not know. So he says, Agam, even though he doesn't know at all the personality of the soul, but its existence is known to him. And he adds, not just its existence, the way it exists. This doesn't mean you know its personality. You know the way it exists is that it energizes you. He's going to speak more details of this in the next paragraph. You know it energizes, gives you life, and you could also know that it energizes your faculties. There's a definition to life, even a biological definition, and definitely an emotional and intellectual definition, a spiritual definition. He feels in the spirit, he feels the chayos, the vitality, the energy. That's why a person could say, today I feel sluggish, today I feel down, I feel like a zombie. All these are feelings that we describe. Or I feel very much alive, I feel energized. Okay, so what's this? Remember, the words are Ohr and Chayos, which he's going to explain shortly. So you feel the Chayos. Let me just go back a second. Yes, and also the Ohr he feels. Now, what's the difference in Chayos and Ohr? That's the next paragraph. But he does clearly say Chayos v'inyan ha'Ohr, hainu Ohr nafshi ha'meir bo. So by Ohr, he doesn't use the word Chayos, which is vitality, more like an energy, an Ohr, a light. We'll soon see what it means. And now he gives an example from a summa. Even a blind person who has never seen light at all knows of the existence of light through the Ohr nafshi that radiates in him. Like if you ask a blind person, do you feel alive? Yes, I feel completely alive. Now, what is that feeling of alive like? That's the Ohr nafshi shemeir bo. Clearly, he's using it on the word Ohr. He's never seen light. He's never seen physical light. But the idea of Ohr as an energy, as a life force, or Ohr as it radiates in the soul, even a blind person knows. So you see clearly, we know the mitzias, may not know the muhus, and the same thing is with all of us. We don't know the muhus of elikus or the neshama, but we know its existence. And he gives another example, like a person who the flash of an idea emerges in your mind, falls into your mind. That's a gili Ohr. It has nothing to do with a physical light. Even if your eyes are closed, you sense an idea as you sense the lightning bolt, a bolt of a flash of a spark of an idea. Another example of sensing the Ohr of something, even though you may not physically see it or even understand where it's coming from exactly. Okay. Now, this is where we stopped. And I was questioning the whole break of the paragraphs. I'm not going to get into exactly that. It's a technical matter. But what he's going to do now, he's going to explain what is the difference in Ohr and Chayos. He referred to the bottom of last page. He now referred to it again here. And he's saying it's all in the context of understanding there's something that we feel within us, which is much more than what he said earlier. Before he spoke more of a, I wouldn't say abstract, but a cognitive contemplation with hasaga that there's a creator, because nothing can create itself, that there's the hafla of isavus, the paradox, there's the multitude, the magnitude of creations, but he hasn't spoken what we feel. Here, he's actually saying we do feel within ourselves, not flesh, we behold God. We feel a sense of life, energy. So therefore, that makes when you contemplate on that, that makes the kiruv of the closeness, and of course, ultimately the love, much deeper, which he's going to later come back to. But that's the point he wants to address now. He's going to explain what is Ohr and Chayos in this next paragraph. So I just wanted to review it because the flow was somewhat, yesterday I wasn't so clear about it. Now I think it's a lot clearer. So unless there's a question, I'm going to continue now in the next paragraph, where he's going to explain Ohr and Chayos, all in the context of something that we feel internally, even if we don't know its full personality at all, and anything about its muhus. Remember, the word muhus comes from mahu. It's inner personality. Mahu, what is it? Like muhus, mah. But mitzias means that it exists. And then discovering what it is requires its own study and analysis and evaluation. Okay. Any questions up till now? If not, here we go further. Here we go. V'hinei, and now, inyan Ohr v'chayos b'chlolos. This inyan of Ohr and Chayos, what is it? What do we mean by Ohr and Chayos? Often these are interchangeable and synonymous words. Ohr is light or energy. Chayos is energy. But when you break it down, it's actually two different types of vitality or energy. One called Ohr and one called Chayos. That's what he's going to explain now. The tfisa, Chayos in general, the distinction is Chayos comes islapsus and tfisa, words he used earlier. Let me just explain islapsus and tfisa, even though I explained it many times. There's two ways that something can manifest in our lives. When you say islapsus, this literally means being enclosed. It's like dressing up in garments. When you take an idea, for example, a teacher, and he gives examples, Mishalim, and language to explain it, he's taking the very idea and he's dressing up the ideas and clothing it in examples or analogies or anecdotes or whatever it may be. That's called islapsus. It's not like just passing through. Sometimes there's a difference in hislapshus and maiver. You may remember the difference. Maiver means like a funnel. A funnel is just channeling, let's say, wine or another liquid from a barrel into a jar or into a cup. It doesn't do anything. It's not hislapshus. It's called passing through. You need it because you need to narrow the channel. That's what a funnel does. But it doesn't change the quality in any way of the wine. But if indeed the wine or the liquid would go through a process, a filter, let's say, that actually changes its being, that's called hislapshus. So hislapshus is a far deeper relationship between the mislabish and the levush, the one that is dressing in that garment and the garment. Whereas something that's l'mayla mislapshus doesn't have quite that. Sometimes it's the difference between pnimi and makif, like he's going to explain here. Now, the slapshus tfisa makes it even stronger. Tfisa means that you're defined by it. You're manifest within it. So it's not just hislapshus. You could dress up in the garment. Let's say a king can dress up in the garments of a pauper, of a what do we call it? A layman, a regular person, a lay person. And the truth is the king doesn't change. He's still the king. So that's not called tfisa necessarily. It means he dressed up. So it's true. He now appears like a lay person, like one of the, what do we call, one of his subjects. Tfisa means you're actually defined by it. Like, for example, when we say that a Talmud, Maglin Rabbi Imay, when a student is sent to Enclothed, to a city of refuge, because he inadvertently killed somebody. So Maglin Rabbi Imay, his teacher goes with him, because the teacher is bound to his student. He's not just his teacher. There's a commitment there. So tfisa is like the neshama and the guf is called, it's even from tfisa. The neshama is in this body, it cannot energize another body. As long as it's in this body, it's hislapshus and tfisa. So tfisa is an interesting word. It means something is grasped. It means you're grasped by it, and you're contained by it, and you're in many ways bound by it. When you say, for example, atzmus is not nitfus in anything, it's because God needs nothing and is all powerful. So therefore, there's no such thing as really being, whatever he does is by choice. It's not because he needs to be there. When we, for instance, when we need to do something, we need to sometimes be bislapshus and an eifon tfisa, because without that, you won't have a relationship with that. So that's the first thing called chayos. So chayos comes bislapshus in the form of tfisa. And the Ohr, who shalamayla mit b'chinas hislapshus. Ohr is also an energy. It's also flowing, but it's higher than hislapshus. It's flowing, but in a sense, it's like he says the next line, it remains removed somewhat. Well, lamayla, what is this lamayla Ohr and Chayos, meaning in elokus and godliness in the higher dimensions? Zeh b'chinas Makif and Pnimi. That's the difference between Makif and Pnimi. Makif also radiates, but it's called Makif not because it surrounds, but because it remains removed from the thing that it is shining over. Pnimi means it is internalized and integrated when we talk about the immanent energy and the transcendent energy. Pnimi is an for example, the power of vision that manifests within the eye, not within the ear. And the vision, the and the keli, are commensurate to each other and tailored for one another. That's a classic pnimi. Makif is like rotzen, the will of a person. The will of a person is the will to see, the will to walk, the will to talk, the will to do anything. So the will is called a makif because it doesn't have a particular location. It affects the entire human being. Or you say the chayos kloli, the fact that we're alive. You're alive from head to toe. There's no difference in the life force that calls someone alive from your head to your toe. That's called a Ohr, like a Ohr kloli or chayos kloli. Chayos would be more the specific energy that enters into the mind, into the heart, the energy in your arms, in your legs. That's more like the specific energy that goes into each faculty, which he's going to explain. So lamayla, it's makif and pnimi. That's the difference between Ohr and Chayos. Ukiyadua, as it's known, and he's now bringing a third term, ba'gimel l'shenis, in the three expressions. We find sometimes Ohr, Chayos v'koyach, haniske b'sefer shel beinim. that's mentioned in Tanya. The Sefer Shalbenim, the Alter Rebbe, in a few places. I think the first place, I have to look it up, where is the first place in Tanya, but he mentions Ohr, Chayos, V'Keyach. And he's not being redundant. They're three different words in Hebrew. So though they have many similarities, and as I mentioned many times, in general, they could be interchangeable, but when you use them together, this is very common in Torah, when you use them together, then they each one focus on a different dimension, even though they're all in general a form of Ohr, Chayos, and Koyach. So Ohr would be sometimes called light or energy, Chayos can be vitality, Koyach can be power or faculty. So you see three different expressions. The Ohr Chayos mebchinas sevav kol. Ohr is the vitality or the energy that comes from sevav kol Makif, that is hamavur b'sefer Shalbenim perik memches. That's explained in Tanya chapter 48, where he says, sevav doesn't mean it surrounds it. It means it doesn't identify with it individually. It's not localized and it's not focused, it's not in any specific way. So it remains somewhat removed from the entity. That is Ohr. The Chayos of b'chinas Ohr Pnimi. And Chayos is a level of Ohr Pnimi, the energy that permeates and immanently enters and integrated and internalized. Hamislabish be'elamis, that manifests, mislabish, here, the word again, gets enclothed in the worlds, la'achyesom, to energize them, sha'elamis malbishim u'masigim es hashpah. And when it comes to Chayos, the worlds, malbishim, they enclose and they dress up, u'masigim es hashpah. It's not removed. They actually identify with it. So it's malbishim, masigim es hashpah, literally like I gave the example with a mushal or whatever example you want to use, that relates directly to that energy. Now, it doesn't mean we know the mahus, it knows the mahus of it, but the mitzvah is for sure, and we'll see where he goes with this. And that's the distinction between Ohr and Chayos. Now, interestingly, he doesn't explain koyach, because it's not relevant to our discussion here. Our discussion is different in Ohr and Chayos. In other places, he does explain koyach in Tafshin Ches, in the Maimorim of Tafshin Ches from the Frierdiker Rebbe, and I believe also Tafreish Samar Gimel, maybe, from the Rebbe Rashab, talks about koyach as well. And koyach, just for the record, really refers to a particular faculty. Ohr and Chayos are both energy differences, general energy, whether it goes within, Pnimi or Makif. And koyach is more of an individual factor, like koyach hariyah, koyach hashmir, the power to see, the power to hear, koyach haseichel, the power to contemplate, the power to conceive, the mind. But it's not relevant to our discussion because here he wants to address Ohr and Chayos. Okay. Now he's going to give an example of this in the nefesh, because right now he went back Lamaila. This is Lamaila Makif and Pnimi, in the worlds and godliness. He says, "Havamoshel b'zeh b'nefeshu," and the example for this in our nefesh, meaning in the human soul, in the human spirit, in our lives, the Chayos hu mashe mislabish beprate evri haguf. Chayos, vitality or energy, is what manifests in the specific limbs or organs of the body, la'achyesom, in order to energize them, in order to give them life. U'kamoy koyach hariyah ba'ayin, like the power of vision in the eye, v'koyach hashmiyah ba'ezen, the power of hearing or listening in the ear, v'koyach hatanua b'yad, the power of movement in the arm. The arm is the primary place of movement, even though the rest of the body also moves. So what do you see here? A specific energy going into a specific part of every haguf. But Ohr, and what is Ohr in this context? That's Chayos. The general vitality, like I said before. This is the general energy of the soul that energizes the body from head to toe or head to foot equally. When you say a person is alive, you don't say he's more alive in his head than he is in his toes. Everything is alive. It's true, the head, when you talk about specifically, is a more important faculty and more vital organ, perhaps. And there's some organs in the body that, God forbid, you can live without. But life, once you have life, life is a general life force that makes you alive. If someone, God forbid, says, I'm only feel alive till the waist and not down, that's a big problem. So it's not about just feeling, it's about there's a life force that keeps a person alive from head to toe. I just wanted to qualify. Even, God forbid, a person who's paralyzed is still alive. You're just not feeling it. So the life force that's general, that equalizes. Whereas Chayos is essentially the energy that goes into each particular part of the faculties, or I would say the limbs and organs of the body. I know you'll say, didn't I say that was koyach? Koyach is the actual faculty. We're talking here about the energy in the faculty, the ohr, the chayos that energizes that particular part. So there's details. Ohr Pnimi, it's an Ohr Pnimi. Whereas in this case, it's a Ohr Proti, I should say. And here he's saying a chayos Proti and a chayos Klali. That's the distinction. Okay, let me stop here for a moment. If there's any questions for clarification, I'll take them.
I had a question. Hello?
Yes. Yep.
Listening. Trying to find the paragraph, or the second line. L'mayla ze b'chinas or Makif or Pnimi. So when he's saying, in terms of the difference between Ohr and Chayos, is he saying that as a mashal, this is the differing levels between Ohr Makif and Ohr Pnimi, or he's saying that's rooted in an Ohr Makif and Ohr Pnimi?
Why can't it be both?
Well, then that's the answer to my question.
Yeah. He uses the word hamoshel bezeh. He does use the word moshel. But we know in Chassidus, a moshel also means it evolves from that level. But it's not significant here one way or the other, frankly. Okay. Ubeprotius, and when you break this down further, gam yesh gam be'er pnimi b'chinas er v'chayos. So till now he's been speaking that one is er makif and one is er pnimi. Now he's saying that also in er pnimi, also in the immanent internal energy, there's also a level of Ohr and Chayos. This is vital, especially when you come to the nefesh, because even the Ohr Klali is an Ohr Pnimi. The nefesh in the body, even that force that equalizes head to foot, is still an Ohr Pnimi. That's what he's going to explain now. So therefore, before we continue, just that. So therefore, also in Ohr Pnimi, there's an Ohr and Chayos. So generally, before he said B'chlolos, Chayos is Ohr Makif, is more Makif. Chayos is Ohr Pnimi, and Ohr is more Ohr Makif or Seviv. Now he's saying that in Pnimi, Ohr Pnimi itself, there's also Ohr and Chayos. And he's going to explain, Ukamoy, like we see, like for example, Ukamoy, like it is, when we see the faculties interact with each other, or more than that, they actually interconnect. They're mislabish one another. For example, when a person uses their mind to write a letter or to write an idea. So that's the slapshus of seichel in the koyach hatanua, in the power of the koyach ha-seichel in the koyach hatanua, the power of intellect into the power of movement. So the faculties are not disjointed, compartmentalized faculties. They work with each other, even though there are specific faculties. So in the slapshus ha-koyach zeh okay, the example he uses is not the one I just gave. Like seichel that manifests within emotions. The seichel, when it's so seichel, we're talking here an intelligent contemplation, like we learned earlier, that causes you to stimulate an emotion. Once there's an emotion that was resulted from your contemplation, from your mind, the seichel recedes in the background. Once you're in let's say, the throes of passion or love for God, let's say, what we're discussing earlier, or in any area where the midas are now coming alive. So the seichel is misalim, b'zeh. So it's mislabish misalim, u'mashe b'murgish, u'b'izgalus yamida. What is felt and sensed and what is revealed is the emotion. So when you see someone expressing, let's say, love to someone, and that love wasn't just a reflexive love. It came after thinking about and appreciating that person. Or in the case of love to God, it came after a contemplation. So when you see the love, you don't see the whole process, the cognitive process that led to it. Even though it's the driving force behind it, it remains somewhat concealed. And what is sensed and what is revealed is the midah, the emotion. We'll soon see how this is going to be related to Ohr and Chayos. He's going to elaborate more on this hislapshus. And we'll soon see how that relates to what we're discussing here. So far, just beginning of an explanation. And he gives another, ukamoi. He gave the example now of the faculties interacting with each other, like seichel and midas. Ukamoi ha-seichel shebepsak din. We find this also a seichel and a psak din. So when you have a rabbi, a rav, or a talmid chacham, a rav, since it's a psak din, who has asked a question. You see it all the time. He's asked a question. Or he sits in a din Torah and he listens to the arguments. Then he goes and deliberates on it. And he can spend hours, tens, hundreds of hours researching, thinking about all the different svaras, this way, that way. There's a whole seichel involved. Then he'll come back and give up psak din. He's going to give his final ruling. Now, done properly, there's no final ruling without all that seichel behind it. Look at the Gemara. The Gemara is all svaras. This way, that way, an argument like this, a counter argument, a theory, another theory. And then there's the halacha, the psak that comes out. What's the conclusion? So the Rambam, for example, is going to bring the Alter Rebbe here, is only the halachas. He doesn't give the whole background. How did we get to this halacha? So he's saying, so the seichel that's in the psak din, it's very diminished, it's very concealed. In the psak din, in the final ruling that says kosher or not kosher, or says you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do it. So there, you only hear the psak, the final ruling, the final resolution. But the seichel is mitzumtzemed, it's not visible, discernible within it. The entire expansion of the mind, and all the theories within it. Because the one who came with the one who rules that psak had many theories. He could have had theories that actually would have gone the other direction. And probably waited back and forth till he came to a conclusion. Like we see the brief rulings and halachas in Shulchan Aruch, in the code of Jewish law, but late time halachas that don't give you the reasons for these halachas, for these rulings. You don't have the gilui of seichel, what he means. You have the gilui of the psak. This is what you're supposed to do. You wake up in the morning, you're supposed to say this bracha. You're supposed to wash your hands. The different things that halachas tell us about whatever has to be done any time of the day or throughout the year, all the different piskei dinim. You're only getting them without time halachas, without the reasoning behind it. So there's no gilui in it. Like he said with the midah, you only see the result. You don't see all the background that led to this point. The ima yesha called inyan medugdik, even though every psak, every detail is precise, al pi atam v'asvara shebezeh. You could say asvara, or you could say v'hasbara, because he doesn't use an aleph here. Either way, so it's very precise according to a reason and a theory or an explanation, but that's within it. Ubi digduke hatevis merumes hatam. And if you look precisely at the precision of the letters, of the words, of the psak, it alludes to the reason. If you really understand, if you go back to the reason, you can sometimes find in the language the reason behind it, but it's only alludes, it's only berumas. Nevertheless, at best it's hinted to, but it's not revealed at all. Because what you're getting is the final resolution, the final halacha. That's why Hilchos Shabbos is going to be, it's a lot of halachas, but it doesn't come close to all the theories behind it, the Masechta Shabbos or other Masechtas that talk about the laws of Shabbos. And when one knows the reasons for these laws, for these rulings, like in the Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe, where he does bring Taimei Halachas. The introduction to Shulchan Aruch, the sons of the Alter Rebbe write that is in contrast to let's say the Beis Yosef, Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch, or the Rambam, the Alter Rebbe does bring, not always and not in all detail, but he brings Taimei Halachas. So when one knows the Taimei Halachas, like we see in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, Meir b'zeh Eir Rav Yeser, then radiates within this halacha Eir Rav Yeser, far greater and more intense energy. It doesn't mean the halacha doesn't have the authority and the absolute authority of a psak. But when you know the reasons, whenever you learn halacha, you understand the reasons, the whole thing comes alive in a different way, is what he's saying here. Ubefrat b'archavas ha'inyanim v'asforos b'ribui gilui er. And especially, not just the reasons, because the Rebbe's reasons are pretty short. But when you go into now the theories, or b'archavas ha'inyanim, the expansion of the ideas, and the theories behind them, b'ribui gilui er, then with a expansive revelation. So that more specifically makes the light even stronger in the halach. Now, why the Rebbe Rashab is elaborating so much on all of this, we'll soon find out, because he's going to come and bring it back, obviously, to Ohr and Chayos HaNefesh, what he was talking about before. And I was going back, and the same is with the contemplation and a comprehension, a divine contemplation and comprehension. The Keshababi Spilus Hamida Misalma Er. It's going back to what he said before. Like it is with Seichel, that once it comes into a state of an excitable and passionate emotion, the energy gets concealed just like the Seichel gets concealed in a halacha. That's all this is coming to explain that idea, that the slapshus of the moichin, of the isbananus and the asoga, when it comes into the midah, this misalama er, the light, the energy gets concealed. The kol zehu, and all this is due to the reason mipnei, because she'era seichel b'chinas chitzenius shabai, because the era seichel compared to the midah, to this passionate feeling, is now like an external thing. It's just a driving force. It led you to this point. So it's called chitzenius. He doesn't mean chitzenius that it's not. Obviously, seichel is the pnimi is behind the midah. But he means in regard to the emotion, when a person is caught up in the throes of the passion of the emotion, so the seichel is only an external element of the emotion. The because even the seichel that is relating to the midas is already seichel, not in its pure and pristine natural form. It's already seichel that's shaykh al midas, just like we talk about seichel that's shaykh to halacha. The psak din is the ruling. The seichel, the pure seichel, is all the theories before you even came to a rule. And then there's the seichel that's informing the ruling. So in a way, in seichel, you have the two levels. The seichel, as it is when you're just expanding on the idea, a brainstorm, a free brainstorm with absolutely no conclusions, no preconceived notions, no proclivities, no inclinations. You're just thinking about an idea, contemplating all the different svaras. That's seichel at its best. Once the seichel now is shaykh al amidus, the seichel is now coming to a conclusion that's chesed or gvura. It's kosher or it's not kosher. It's muter or osir, or machmir or mekel. You're going to be lenient or you're going to be stringent. So that he says is seichel shaykh al amidus loy atzmus seichel mamish. It's not the core idea itself. It's not the core intelligence itself. If it was the core seichel, then the seichel is dominant. And when the seichel is dominant, that's what radiates. But being now that the seichel is so-called diminished itself in order to inform the midah, so once it becomes an emotion, so then it's in a form of al-kain ba. Therefore, the seichel comes in a form of islapshus, enclothed, this almus b'midas, enclothed and concealed in the emotions. So we see now what islapshus hakeich zeh means. It comes into this form, it gets concealed. Upnimius haseichel, that's chitzenius haseichel, because you're not getting the full intensity of the intelligence itself. That you have to, like for example, many times a person comes to a conclusion, and then someone says, "Can you give me the reasoning behind your conclusion?" And they go into a whole elaborate pilpul, a whole elaborate discussion. That's when you're getting their whole seichel behind it. Whereas when they give you the conclusion, they're only giving you the enough you need to understand the conclusion. The seichel hashaychel amidus, like he's saying here, or like with the psak din. But what's pnimius haseichel? Hu atzmis haseichel shalamayla ma'amidus. That's the core intelligence, the core mind that's higher than emotions. There you're detached, you're objective, you're not involved in any particular conclusion or any particular inclination. I'm sorry, there the Ohr is not diminished, and it radiates with far more intensity, far more revealed. Whereas in the Midas, it's not that way. Like exactly in the example with the psak, the ruling and the reasoning behind it. Okay, now he's adding something which is a little needs to be explained. So now he's saying that sometimes midas come from the etzem haseichel. Generally speaking, it's not that way. The emotions we're accustomed to come from chitzenius haseichel, but when the midas come from pnimius haseichel, he says then they're midas be'efen acher. They're completely different type, and they're a different quality, a different type of emotions. The eined haseichel misalim behem, and in that case, the seichel is not concealed in them. U'kamoishin is bar le'el become a duchtin, as was explained earlier in a number of discourses. Now, I'm not sure whether he means midas shebeseichel, or remember he also spoke about midas shebeseichel or midas sichlius. Yeah, if you remember when he spoke about mutva, murgish, and muskel, he spoke that there's a level of emotions, and then there's a level of emotions as they're guided by intelligence, and then there's the level of emotions that elevate to the level of intelligence. In other words, they become removed from the subjectivity of emotions. I'm not sure he means that, or he means something else. I need to do a little more research. But he's clearly distinguishing with the midas that he's talking about here, where the seichel is concealed, and that's when you have a full-blown emotion, even though it's being driven by a intelligence, as opposed to something on a midah that's coming straight from the pnimius haseichel itself. I mean, if my instinct would tell me that, for example, if you have someone on the level like a Rebbe, and he's immersed in a very deep delivery of a maimer or a sicher, and you see an emotion come out of that, like he's very passionate about it, so there you could say it's not the emotion that grew out of the seichel that is now being expressed, let's say, in the love for someone, or Avos Yisrael, Avos Hashem, but it's the passion of the very seichel itself. That would be my instinct of what he means here. But I don't know how relevant it is to the whole discussion. It's just really a contrast. What he really wants to focus on are, of course, seichel that's misalim and concealed within the midah. So, but he does mention this, so I'm explaining it as best to my ability. I think that's what it means here. I'm just looking how far this goes before he comes back to explain the whole topic that we began, which is Ohr and Chayos in the Ohr Pnimi itself. I mean, let's see for a second. Okay, it's more to the bottom of the page. I don't know if we're going to reach there today. That's the thing. And I don't want to leave this hanging before Pesach.
Is there a way you can just read it and translate it quickly without too much explanation, and we can listen to it during Kol HaMoed, and we want to do it?
It's just not my nature to read something that I don't understand. I mean, I could read. Everybody can read it.
Not the way you read it.
Yeah, but I'll read it quickly. Then it's going to be just quick reading, and it's going to. I mean, the main point I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to get back to the point of Ohr and Chayos, and that I see is all the way at the bottom of the page. So it's more than just reading a few more lines. Yeah, my exactly as I suspected. It's not going to be 5 minutes. This is a serious half-hour discussion to understand the flow here. Because he doesn't just go back easily to Ohr and Chayos and Nefesh. The Rebbe Rashab went into a whole discussion, and then he's going to bring it back. I just thought I'd try to sum it up, but I see even that's not going to be that simple. I mean, my initial guess was going to be, and I don't like to speculate, is that Chayos is more like the slapshus that conceals, like the seichel that's concealed in the midah. So Chayos, the Chayos HaNefesh is concealed, more concealed in the specifics, whereas the Ohr is more like the seichel on its own, remains somewhat removed from the midah, from the psak. That's where it seems like he was going. But I don't see that he says that explicitly, to be honest. So I'm concerned that I may not be correct in that. The only way to know is to really study it closely. My suggestion is we stop here. Everybody can feel free to read. And you know what? After Pesach, it'll all come clear. And maybe what I just said is correct, but I'm not positive about that. Because I don't see him coming back and saying, this is Ohr and this is Chayos. That's what I'm looking for. That's what it sounds like. Okay, but I'll just sum up this. What he is definitely going to come back to say is all this is coming as part of the process of the divine soul's contemplation and concentration and comprehension of Elokus. And he's clearly going to distinguish between two ways, the Ohr and the Chayos, where both of them together ultimately stimulate the emotions to love God. The question is, what level of divine energy is manifesting? The Pnimi or the Makif, or within the Pnimi itself, the Ohr or the Chayos. That's the general gist of it. So it's not, that's where he's going with this. And once we do that, we'll understand how the Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, the soul of a human being, when it comes alive and is stimulated, like he's describing here, actually radiates and illuminates the darkness of the animal soul and of this physical world that conceals the divine. That's the punchline here. That's going to be, and then he's going to conclude that at the end of the paragraph on page 1310. So however this is going to be break itself down, that we'll get through the details when we learn this next class. But that's the general structure of it. So that should be pretty good, and it's pretty helpful in understanding the context. But I will stop here. That's what I think is the right thing to do. Okay. Any questions? I mean, obviously questions that are what we discussed, that not what we didn't learn yet, you know.
When is the next class? The first class after Pesach, is it Sunday, April
Not
24th
Sunday.
or Monday?
It'll be Monday. It'll be Monday.
Monday, April 25th.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions on what we've learned? If not, we'll stop here by this period. That's three quarter, almost 15 lines from the bottom of the page, 13.